Shall we start? It's 5 to, we are 25 minutes late. We are waiting for David, but I think that he will come because we have quite a strict timetable to end for the airport. And now, today, it's the day for practical discussions, and now we really like to use the knowledge of you. How is your, what kind of experiences you have, what kind of, how you think that you would contribute, which kind of issues you would like to know more. We didn't have that much time yesterday to discuss or make questions, but today we hope that we can have it really interactive, that you are actively involved in this. And we have with us now Constance Metzer from the Council of Europe, Cultural Route, and she's the project manager for Roots for You project. And this project has been, first of all, it is a cooperation project between the Commission and the Cultural Roots. And there the idea is to use cultural roots as a tool for macro-regional development. So this is about employment, this is about enhancing creative industries and enhancing tourism, and trying to link the cultural root activities in the other development processes, ongoing processes, so that it doesn't remain like an isolated issue, cultural issue on itself, but is inside there in the development. And this is the main point, how to make it, where should we be involved when we want to be part of that development. And now you have had many studies and workshops in different macro regions, so she's also a person who can compare the Baltic Sea region and us between other regions and see where are our strengths and maybe where is something that we can try to develop. So use her experience with your questions. Please, Constance.
Good morning, my name is Constance, and I would like to start with a question. Before this seminar, how many of you knew what the cultural root of the Council of Europe is? Just raise your hands. So I would say it's a little bit more than half of it, which is quite a high, let's say, percentage. Because in the framework of Roots for You, we did a study on cultural roots in the Baltic Sea region, where a marketing expert asked tourists, cultural route operators, tourism professionals, what is a cultural route, and what we realized is that many people don't really know it yet. So when we talk about cultural routes of the Council of Europe, it's still a program which is small and in the development. Roots for You. Is about two different initiatives. It has on one side the initiative of the European Union on macro-regional strategies. You see they have developed 4 different strategies for the Adriatic Union region, for the Alpine, for the Baltic Sea and for the Danube. And what is really important are 2 things. The first is that the macro-regional strategy for the Baltic was the first one. And there is a reason why it was the first one, and the reason is simply that the European Union considered that the Baltic Sea region has already such a good level and ground level of cooperation on a regional level that they decided we start there, it's easier. And then they went on to other regions. And some of the regions it was very difficult. But the idea behind it is that the European Union, or Europe in general, if you talk about it, because it also includes non-EU countries, Europe is so big and so vast that when we talk about challenges, when we talk about opportunities, it's difficult to group all together, and this is why the European Union decided to go with a regional focus and to group regional priorities.
Good idea.
So we have on one side the macro-regional strategies, and on the other side we have the cultural roots of the Council of Europe. I just give you some examples. And it's important to know that this project is small, but it's already quite, let's say, old, because it was started in '87, and the first cultural route was Santiago de Compostela. It was a pilgrimage route. And I mention that because it gives you an idea about this program. It was really the idea of intercultural dialogue, of walking, so sustainable tourism, and meeting people, exchanging along a route. So that was the initial idea in '87. Since then, the program has changed completely. So basically, the first cultural route was inscribed or certified without a real certification process. It was just this idea about routes that connect people across national borders. And then in '98, the Institute on Cultural Route was created. It's a national institute. Sometimes people wonder and mix up IPA institute. It's difficult to understand the different structures, but for you it's important to know that we have an institute which has some sort of advisory capacity, and it's hosted in Luxembourg. So when you apply for certification, the institute are the ones that will consult and advise you. So they are, let's say, the experts, like ICOMOS or IUCN in the World Heritage level. You have the institute that takes care of looking at your certification, doing a completeness check, and also giving you support. So if you consider applying for the certification, you should go to the institute and ask them for their advice and for their guidance. In 2010, an enlarged partial agreement was created, and that's a very specific and typical governing structure of the Council of Europe. The Council of Europe has created these EPAs to put programs on a financial liability of member states. So the program is fully funded by contributions of the EPA member states, and also at the same time the member states, they meet once a year and they discuss certification. So there is a stronger level of influence by the part of the member states. And then we have 2019, last year, the last certification cycle, we had 38 cultural routes. Let me say that last year we had an explosion of cultural routes, a lot of certifications, quite unusual. This year, as you might have seen, we had less applications and it got less. So last year we had 8, but normally this is an unusual number, and it would be also, let's say, an unsustainable number because the program is small and it needs to grow at a recent pace. Roots for You is a joint program, as Marianne said, of the European Union and the Council of Europe, and we have 3 priorities. So the first one is we really want to strengthen cultural cooperation, and then we really talk about transnational cooperation, because that is, let's say, the challenge in the cultural arena. And then the second part we focus on is sustainable development. That is where the cultural roots enter. It's really about thinking about ways how to ensure sustainable tourism, slow tourism, green tourism. And last but not least, because the Council of Europe has a convention on social participation and heritage, the FAVO Convention, we want to strengthen the social participation and the community engagement. So, and there I have to say that cultural roots are quite extraordinary, because they are networks. They work by the people on the ground. Cultural routes are, first of all, not proposed by member states, so they are proposed by the stakeholder themselves. That's important to know because it's really the initiative comes from the stakeholder themselves. That has an advantage because you have the power to decide if you want to try to become a cultural route. That has a disadvantage because you might not have enough funding and might not have enough arguments so far and enough support sometimes to put forward the application because it's on a level of the stakeholders. It's not the member states that hand in the application. We have, let's say, 4 areas. We try to create new cultural routes. So for each macro region, we have identified priorities, and we also strengthen cultural routes that exist on the ground. We put a focus on involving local stakeholders because this is the comparative advantage of cultural routes. And this is also a way to lead to our next aim, which is the regional development, because cultural routes, as you have heard, they cross mainly remote areas, and involving the communities of these remote areas also brings a benefit in terms of regional development. And last but not least, we did activities to increase the visibility of cultural routes. And I have to say that for me, one of the big success of Roots for You was that we managed to put cultural routes on a macro-regional level of the European Union, where not many people knew about cultural routes, including the European Union. So for the Danube and the Adriatic Union, we have included cultural routes in the action plan, meaning that EU funding for the next years is aligned with cultural routes, which opens, of course, the door on a sustainable way and with a view into the future that new projects that apply, they receive money mainly in form of Interreg project applications, because cultural routes now is a priority in these action plans. We realized one thing: there is, first of all, there is not much knowledge about cultural route, and second of all, there is sometimes missing the data. So we did 3 big parts of studies, and the first one was that we did a study on the economic impact of cultural routes, because many things are said that cultural routes have an economic impact, but sometimes they are missing data to prove this statement. So we had experts really looking into the question and retrieving data. So these studies will be published next month, and then we also have a proof. Yes, cultural route can have an economic impact on a regional basis. I already mentioned the branding study. That was a huge exercise of more than a year with marketing experts walking through the regions and asking people, what is a cultural route? What do you associate with a cultural route? What is for you the advantage of a cultural route? And they put together all these information and made recommendations how to increase the visibility of cultural routes. And then last but not least, and that is important when you think about cultural routes, it's always transnational management of cultural networks. Then we did studies on policies, and we looked into what are national policies with the view also what needs to be transnational policies. But it's really important to think about when you want to create a cultural route, you have different national regimes in terms of legislation, in terms of resources, in terms of language. So creating a transnational management requires more efforts and of course has a certain challenge vis-à-vis to a national network. We did a different call for proposals. We did in total 3 rounds of call for proposals for each macro regions, where the last one on the development of tourism products and services. And you can find all this on the website, which I will give you later. And what we realized is that for cultural routes, very often, not only for projects, but also for certified cultural routes, there is, first of all, it takes time to apply. So there is a lack of resources to apply for existing funding opportunities, which exist quite a lot in this area, because cultural routes are quite unique in what they do. So you have a lot of possibilities and opportunities to apply successfully for funding. And we realized there is often a lack of knowing what needs to be put in an application form. This we realized when we did the selection with the European Union, and we heard what they put as criterion. They are very, very strict in their selection. So we did a mini guide, and we put together all what we found out, what was, let's say, common mistakes from the side of the European Union. And we put that together. For example, what we realized is that if you don't focus on the specific call, if you write an application, you say like, oh, let me write 10 applications, one will go through, it's not working. The European Union really looks into tailor-made applications. They need to be really focused on the call, and there need to be key terminologies that need to be mentioned. You really need to focus on what is written in the call. So we did trainings and information session to train how to improve, not only for our calls, but also for calls of the European Union in general. And the Commission participated. We did different trainings for each macro region, and we also did, that was the last round last year, stakeholders meetings of projects to meet with what they gave us, their stakeholders, and we met and we discussed how to further develop a cultural route. So we had, let's say, 2 different rounds of trainings. One more general on cultural routes, but then one really specific with the people that want to create a new cultural route. And we realized one thing, the network between the people from the macro-regional strategies that sometimes work on cultural tourism, cultural route, and the network of the cultural routes was not existing. So this is something that we brought together to bring expertise together. And we did an e-learning course. It has 5 modules. The first one is on how to certify a cultural route. We put all what is existing from the side of the Council of Europe, but also from the side of Routes for You. We made many interviews with certified cultural routes. We asked them what is an advantage, what do you recommend, because we wanted to have some sort of mentoring of those that have already been certified. And we put that in the first manual. We have other manuals which deal with the topic of cultural tourism. One is on social participation, and one is on branding. So you have different modules, and with the modules, which you can use, they are free to use, and they are on the Council of Europe website. So you go on the Routes for You website, you need to inscribe, but it's a Council of Europe e-learning course, so you don't need to be afraid about sharing your data. It's Council of Europe. And then you can use all the e-learning courses of the Council of Europe, including ours on cultural routes. And we did a manual series, so where we also put all the information if you don't have the time or you want after the e-learning course have something in writing for yourself. We have a Routes for You network, and we are at the moment, let me mention one activity which we do. We launch now a European Youth Card, Cultural Routes Card Edition. So basically, I don't know if you know it, it's European Youth Card is a card which younger people normally in the countries below 30, they can have it and they get many discounts. There are quite a lot of card holders. So we started an initiative with countries in the Danube where where we made a campaign to promote the cultural route in the Danube. So the card holders, they receive special offers linked to the cultural route, and they know the cultural routes. So we used that. Let me mention one last thing. We also did a trip planner. So basically we created a platform where you can plan your trip in the different macro-regions, including in the Baltic. And we put information on the cultural routes crossing this specific macro-region. And you have then all the information on hotels and so on also. So you can really plan your trip. Restaurants, hotels, museums, you find all the information on prices and opening hours. We are planning at the moment 3 press trips in the macro regions. 1 press trip has taken place in the Baltic last year, and these trips are an opportunity to show to media professionals what the cultural routes do. So for us it's a promotional possibility. So that was for Routes for You. I want to ask you if you know how many or which cultural route cross the Baltic Sea region. Do you have an idea?
Some idea. You haven't noticed.
Don't be shy.
Hansa.
Yeah, Hansa, Vikings, Olaf.
Iron Curtain Trail, you have heard about that?
Yes. Iron Curtain Trail.
Rock Art Trail.
Yeah. That's quite, yeah.
I would say about 10.
10?
About.
10? Okay, let's look into it. So this is the map on our website. We are just updating it, so it's at the moment you can't see it, but please look at the map. You see immediately one thing. These are the members of the cultural route. It's not, we display cultural routes according to their members in the different countries, and you see immediately there is a huge focus on Southern Europe countries. You have a lot of members in Portugal and Spain, a lot of members in Italy. You have less members in the Northern Europe and very few in Finland. Let me say that this is a database, that's an exercise which we did. We compiled all the members, and it's an ongoing exercise because we realized that this is one of the difficult parts, and this is really a recommendation I can give to anybody that wants to become a cultural route. Have your data on your membership really clear, because what we realized is that sometimes cultural routes give data that are then not up to date, and it's really important to communicate the right names and numbers of members also for these kind of mapping exercise. What is a cultural route? You have heard it yesterday, so I will not really go into it. It's a certification. And here, EPA, as I said, it's the enlarged partial agreement. So this is a description for all those member states that have signed the EPA and sit in the EPA. It's very important that the Council of Europe is not awarding the certification. Many people say it, but it's the EPA, it's the governing board of the EPA. It's important because these are the member states that decide. It's not the Council of Europe that decides who will get a certification or not. We have different categories, and we tried a little bit to group it, looking into what is existing. So from the chronological, and we thought there are 2 ways. We can go chronologically, and then we see we have prehistory, we have medieval Europe, we have modern Europe. So we have different phases which are so far reflected in cultural routes. And then we have themes. And then we try to focus on very general terminologies. Spirituality, we said, because it's not just about religion. We have cultural roots that reflect spirituality in some way or the other. Arts, Alvalto is of course very much in this area. Agriculture, because all the cultural roots are landscapes. And many of those also represent a way of agriculture practices, like for example, Itavitis is about viticulture, about how to cultivate the landscape and to produce wine. We have a lot of historical figures. So far now, no female figure, it's all male figures, that would be a gap. Geography, simply because we have cultural roots that focus very much on the geographical features. For example, in the Alpine region, we have cultural roots that play with the mountain landscape of the Alpines, because that is, let's say, the characteristic feature. So you have different themes. And this is really important for the cultural roots of the Council of Europe, because there is a lot of misunderstanding about it. We are not talking about roots always. We are not, I mean, yes, the first cultural route was a pilgrimage path and you could walk it, but we have many other routes. We have the linear routes, but we have also reticular routes, which are dots, like Hansa. The Hansa cities are not linked by ways you can walk along. They are cities. It's a network of cities. Or we have territorial routes, like for example, roots of the olive tree. It's about different olive tree regions where they cultivate oil or olives, and they are brought together. It's important to know for you that when you think about creating a cultural route, you can, but you do not need to think about how can we create a path or a trail to walk along or to bike along or hike along. You can also think first about who are my members, and then decide if you want to try to connect those members by a trail at a later stage. That is possible. It is really a decision up to you. So I know that there are several cultural roots projects, and I would like just to ask the question, if you see like the different ways you have different types of cultural root, what would you consider, what would be your cultural root, what type of cultural root? And those that are certified, can you please share your experience? What is your network? What does it consist of?
Yes, hello, good morning everybody. So I'm working at the Alvar Aalto Foundation for preparing Alvar Aalto route application, and I think in our case we have the total of our cultural route is like dot, what was the term, reticular?
Yeah.
Reticular
Yes.
model. But then locally and between the cities we've got routes as well, so we've like packaged up tourism products that can be bought through a travel agency. So on a small scale we have got like paths and really nice packages too.
If I could just say that that's a sort of a model that I'm seeing more and more, is that you have various dots, and at the dots there are linked sort of, as it were, sub-routes that bring together.
By theme, like by a certain aspect of the theme.
Who else wants to share?
James, do you want to add something to your presentation yesterday? All these locations and challenges.
Yeah, well, on a route level, so we're a linear route, but soon I hope we're also going to be a thematical route. So then there'll be possibilities to get some very strong points, part like Savonlinna, Gotland, into the routes. It's going to be both. And then maybe a little bit different how they work as well. That a pilgrimage route is quite clear how it works. I mean, there's a certain purpose, but thematical points, there's maybe more historical and cultural interpretation that works around it. And then in the local area, so we have a lot of stakeholders that are involved in the route. So local associations, companies, municipalities, and in that way trying to get a good service provision. Also then building packages with tour operators.
How do you get these local stakeholders? How do you involve them?
We've had a lot of workshops. So at the local level, courses, workshops, information evenings, also events. So we try to inspire also by, for example, pilgrimage people. Maybe if I ask you what is a pilgrimage, you have an idea in your head, but I find people that do, for example, musical pilgrimages or pilgrimages through food. So we've organised events where they've come and they've explained how they do that, and they show that, okay, this is how we do it through music. So try to inspire that you can innovate new kind of products and new things. And also for local people, I think that instead of saying this is like a tourism thing, we think it's a great idea to say that this is also for you. That for local people, they can get involved. They can also be part of the pilgrimage by working with pilgrims. So it can be just helping them spontaneously or starting small businesses. So trying to involve local people and working with kids, for example, because I think also someone else said yesterday that kids are a perfect way of reaching families. And I know with our social media, when we've put stuff out that the kids have done, they're the ones that in the local area get spread the most, because the grandparents and the families are sharing that, hey, this our kids that have done this art for us, for example. So I think very much grassroots, local integration.
It's very interesting what you're saying, two things, because for the young people it's true that our experience was also that what the roots tell us is when you give them in their hands a task, they will prepare something that you did not think about at your age, and it becomes very energetic. So it's a very, let's say, productive cooperation that should be done. And the second thing is that what we also realized is because cultural routes are sometimes smaller and they go to remote areas, they are not the places where will be masses of tourism, or if you do a cultural event, it might not be that you have 2,000 people coming to a concert. But for the local communities, a small scale cultural event linked to a cultural route might have a very, very big relevance on the ground for the people there, to bring together a village, to build on community, to increase attractiveness, to help them to express proud in their heritage. Do you want to add something on Iron Curtain Trail? It's quite evident. No?
Of course, what is important with the Iron Curtain Trail, that is a cooperation of all the countries, and it is supported by the European Commission. They made the workshops, and now the countries are working on it. And of course, it is different, for example, for signposts. The first one is, I mentioned it, I think, it is Serbia. They made 710 kilometers all now signposted, and I got a lot of invitations, especially now because we have the 30th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall and the fall of the Iron Curtain. And I was twice in St. Petersburg, I was in Gdansk, I was even also in Innsbruck, although it is not close to the Iron Curtain. So the interest is big, and that is a support for the cooperation as well. And of course, because it is a European project, it is a cross-border project as well.
And how did you attract the interest in the beginning? You know, when you started the Iron Curtain Trail?
Yeah, when I started, because I come from Berlin, the Berlin Wall Trail was a model, and today, with the experience of that, it is signposted, built in a bicycle-friendly manner, and it is a touristic highlight. And on tourism, especially here in Finland, what for me was new, in the northern part of Finland, they said, tourism in winter is not a problem, but in summer we have not so many tourists. And that is a good chance to make it, and therefore they are very interested in this. especially in the eastern part, because I heard from West Finns, they say, oh, the Europeans will not go to the east part of Finland because here the Baltic Sea is on the western side of Finland. But so the interest is in a different way, and and because I made a lot of presentation and from the European Cycle Federation, they have coordinators for each country, and they are working on it. And here the coordinator of Finland is sitting behind me, but she did a lot. Yeah, but she did a lot for me, and that is important.
Miguel, what can you say just shortly?
Okay, type of route, well, maybe most of the people could think that we have a linear route, because at the end we are following the steps of someone who was traveling, but in fact our route is a mix of different routes, and that is why we, as I mentioned yesterday, we call it the cultural emperor routes in plural, because we have some specific routes related with some moments of his life when he was going somewhere for something, even to war or to make peace or to sign a treaty or to get married or just to get crowded. So those are the linear routes that in some way you can follow, and those are the routes we are developing. But at the same time, we are celebrating a specific, special moments in the life of that person, of Emperor Charles V. It could be the crowning, it could be the signing of a treaty, or it could be the landing in a new country. So for that, then we have activities that can be organized and developed on the spot. So you don't really have to follow a route from a beginning to an end, but you just go to specific places where things are happening in specific dates. And in our case, it's a little bit special. Well, I guess anyone has special things in his route, but in our case, because he was an emperor, everything is record. Every day of his life is record, so we know what he did every day, what happened, who meet. So you can organize specific events to celebrate every day of the year something that he was doing in a specific place. So for those things that are very important, like very big event, then you have a specific big activities where you can follow the steps of the emperor in different seasons of the year all across Europe. So we have at the end two kind of activities, those that are more related with linear routes, where you can make walking and hiking routes. Now we are developing cycling routes, also motor routes to follow the steps of the emperor, but at the same time you can just go to specific places to celebrate and commemorate specific activities, or you just go to a place where you just make a part of that route. I mean, you don't have to go from A to Z, but you can just make it from, let's say, G to I. So you don't need really to make the whole route, and you don't have a specific end. So you can make it in different parts. I think that is also a little bit different because it's a mix of the different types of route you saw in the different graphics. I think one of the important things in this kind of routes is to have the flexibility to adapt to the different conditions that the route can develop, because there is the classical route, like the first one was the Saint-Jacques route, the Santiago route, where normally everybody goes to Santiago, so it's a very linear route following the steps of the apostle to go to Santiago. That is the model we started to follow at the beginning, but then you realize that you have a specific, every route has a specific, how do you say, things, well, in general, that you have to adapt to your needs and to the members of the route. So it's a kind of mix for us.
Yes.
Once I have forgotten, because there is a cooperation also of, for example, of tourist organizations. In the Weinviertel in Austria, they made a trip 350 kilometers by bike from Znojmo nearly to Bratislava, and it was a cooperation of Slovakia, Czech and Austria. And they did it, and they invited also the mayors of the cities, and so this cooperation, the cross-border cooperation, that is a good model to make it. And now it is signposted in each of the 3 countries. Of course, the trail is a cross-border section. Sometimes it's in Slovakia, sometimes in Czech, and sometimes Austria. And this must be improved also for other regions. And then they notice the interest, and the interest is very big.
It's very important to think about that when you create a new cultural route, you don't need to decide, okay, we are just a linear route, as you just heard. You can think out of the box. You can really also think, you might have members which you can't reach by walking or hiking. Just think about who are your potential members you want to involve. So let's go on and let's look into cultural routes in the Baltic Sea region. Give you the description of the members, and you see there is a geographical imbalance. And then let's go on the list of members. We just talked a little bit about it, and also there you can see that there is a discrepancy of members. I will switch to another slide which shows it a little bit better. So these are the members in the Baltic. And for example, what you also realize is there are quite a few tourism stakeholders so far. And let me say what also is striking, there are not a lot of universities, institutions that are members so far. So these are 2 areas which should and could be further developed. And but this is linked to Hansa, because Hansa is a very strong cultural route in the Baltic, and it consists of municipalities and cities. Most members are cities and municipalities. That has an advantage, because normally they have already the structure, the funding, they have very often already their meeting between the cities. It's easier, let's say, to group them. But a network existing exclusively of municipalities, you might risk of losing the cultural aspect of the route.
It's true that in this kind of presentation it can seem like you would lack this important groups of stakeholders, but I will have to, for example, in our network of Alvar Aalto route, the reason why for the moment I'm directly working with the regional tourism organizations, which most are inside a city organization. They are not like separate ones. Some of them are. They are like formed by several municipalities. The reason for that is that our coordinating structure at the Alvar Aalto Foundation is very small, so I just don't want to have contracts with 200 small businesses. I cannot handle that. So I've constructed our network in a way that they do participate, and they are there to design the tourism services, they're there in the workshops. But I don't do partner contracts directly with the tourism businesses, because I want to have the link through like the other level of regional or municipality who is doing that job in the region anyway. So it's a construction that is very efficient in that sense. But it doesn't mean that we would not work with them. On the contrary, it's the most important thing is to work with the actual travel businesses. But as the travel businesses are very small, very often they are like one man or one woman businesses, or two or a couple who is running a wonderful place somewhere in a remote part, like we saw yesterday at dinner. It's quite complicated to manage the number of contracts directly with those. So I think it's better to work with the regional organizations and with the municipalities in order, just for practical reasons.
Yes.
I'm just thinking maybe I hope I'm not too sort of pessimistic about this, but if I think that I would need to convince my stakeholders if I had an idea of a cultural route, and then I would like to talk to the people that are actors in where I live, I would run into the fact that there are so many nominations, there are so many certifications, there are so many programs that these stakeholders are asked to be a part of. Like there are World Heritage Sites, there are different, like for national parks where I work, there are different certifications. Are you sustainable? Are you good in tourism? And different cities have different city networks, sustainable cities or small but sustainable cities. There are so many sort of systems. What is the added value and what is the unique selling point of this one? Have you met this, and do you know this, what I'm talking about?
It will come a little bit later.
Okay.
I will answer to that, but it's a very important point. It's true that that is one of the biggest challenge when you have a project, to convince stakeholders in the beginning, because it's a risk. The risk is to put resources in a project that in the end doesn't get certified or might, not come to a successful ending. That is, let's say, a big step in the beginning to take. Mm-hmm. And it's true that sometimes people tend to say, what is the added value? I can answer you immediately what is the difference to UNESCO sites. Many of the cultural route members would never be a UNESCO site because they simply do not comply with the criteria of outstanding universal value. There it's a different value, it's a European value. You have sustainable cultural tourism, you have young people, you have different criteria that are not similar. So it's not, let's say, a competition or a question either or. I think you really have to say that cultural routes, it's for the remote areas that might otherwise not get the same recognition, and they get it on an international level. But I will come back to that at a later stage. And you have already answered my next question, which are gaps or not gaps in the cultural routes list of members. So anybody else wants to say something on that?
I have one more idea. I'm thinking about how about like big businesses that would actually really be like sponsors. Do you have any?
I've known a number of projects where that has been a key objective. I don't know any projects where it's been successful.
Why? What is the problem?
I think that you need to separate businesses from foundations that are attached to businesses. For example, I have seen cases where there have been non-profit foundations attached to businesses which can be very interested. Giving you an example on relating to the Silk Route in Europe. There is the Ratti Foundation in Como, and they are a big supporter. They're a big supporter of it, but for essentially cultural reasons and for good PR in general for the Ratti company. In terms of the actual business, you come across just a fundamental question: is a business needs to have a return on investment.
In time. Also, quickly in time, quicker than a cultural route.
Yes, and so and I think that's absolutely right. I mean, the cases that I've seen, the businesses have been there at a couple of meetings, then they lose patience, and they say, "Well, I can see that this is going to be very important in 5 years or in 10 years' time, but at the moment."
Then when Finland was joining to EPA and we made this study, one of the arguments or things that we were interested is that we were thinking that so the northern teams are missing and this modern 20th century it's missing and there we could contribute. And now I think that it was very interesting that this somehow the female history or that is also missing, and I think that if I think Europe as a whole, we have something to contribute. What is somehow the role of women and how they have, what kind of impact they have, and what kind of potential and possibilities they have in society. So this was interesting idea.
After the day, Women's Day.
You can't ignore it.
Yes.
Maybe someone knows, because we've been thinking about, well, also, I mean, this is the sustainability, but I think in our area, our selling point is that we don't have any big businesses. There's no hotel chains, and that's what we're trying to promote. So for a small company, they're too small. But we've been thinking about crowdfunding for specific infrastructure investments, because often, especially pilgrimages, have a brand loyalty, a brand love. But I don't know, do you have you heard of like crowdfunding for specific purposes? Or
I don't know examples. I think it's a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
Because I think it's something, crowdfunding can really bring sort of grassroots support for local projects. I mean, I think if you had a project, for example, for accommodation along the route,
cheap accommodation. Also thinking about supporting, for example, unemployed people, that they could also participate in the path, so having more of like a social element, but to drive.
We just had a maximum discussion on it because we have a colleague that is working on the crowdfunding webpage, and she said that where you can put your project and then people can give money for that. And she said more than half of the projects get the money they plan to raise. So it's apparently a very successful way of trying to raise money. And also, of course, it's a way to involve people.
So she was from a crowdfunding website.
Yeah, I can give you the context. Anything? Yes?
Well, I will say there is like two things that maybe can be improved. One of them is like, and this is a message that the Council of Europe is already very conscious about, that is to improve the connection between the certified cultural routes, so we can create synergies. Because right now every route is working in its own way, and it is true that it's difficult to find the ways of cooperating, and I'm sure that if we were working like a whole, like a single body of certified cultural routes, working more together and developing more tools together, even to promote tourism or trading or these kind of things, I think that will be much better for all of us, because right now everyone is going in the different directions and they are doing whatever they can do with the means they have, and sometimes you are just wasting your time because someone is doing that in a better way, and you don't know that, so I think we could work a little bit more together. Well, I know the Council of Europe is already conscious about that. They are promoting that, but we don't have tools for that, because we have our own worries, I mean, everyday worries. So it's difficult to think on something bigger to cooperate with other routes when you even have problems to cooperate with your own partners within your route. And maybe I would like to have a kind of general program to foster this. And I know this costs money in some way, so that goes to the second point, which is a kind of real program, like the European Union programs, which is specific to promote activities of cooperation between the cultural routes that are certified. My colleagues from the Alvarado routes just mentioned, why don't we look for big sponsors, like big companies that maybe they would like to be there, that could help with these kind of things. Well, I think we have a problem there for big companies, especially because normally these big companies are more focused on big businesses and to make big profit. And we have to bear in mind that cultural routes certified by the Council of Europe, this is important, they are not only focused on making money, they are mainly focused from the very beginning on promoting history, culture, values, and then we use that also to promote tourism, regional development, and so on. And sometimes that is a clash between a private company who wants to get money and a route who really wants in his genes to promote something that is more intangible, like values, like history, and there we can have a problem. Then I think it's much better to involve local businesses, small communities, I mean, enterprises and so on, because it's the only way that you have a real impact on the territory, on the land where you are working. Otherwise, for instance, let's say that we have a big hotel chain, a chain that is promoting and helping developing cultural routes. At the end, the money is going to go to a big group, business group, and it's not going to have a real effect on the local, let's say, community. I think, I see she's going to react. The other thing I'm lacking is really to have this program to help routes to develop like a single brand that really helps to work all of us in the same direction, in the same way, so we have at least a minimum of standards we have to follow. Not only the criteria that are asked to be certified, but a minimum of working methodology that we all should follow to create more synergies. This is what I lack a little bit. Maybe we will go there, but I don't know how, because I know there is a lack of money, a lack of funding. Maybe partnerships, a good partnership with the European Union, a stronger one than the one we are having right now, will help a lot, because as we have programs for the European capitals of culture at the European Union level, we could have a program for European cultural routes, which is demonstrate that it has a real impact on citizens and communities. And I was not criticizing you, just reflecting on that.
Not a personal, but all the very, very important conversation. What I would love to point out to you, Miguel, is that I think we might be wrong to sort of like fortify this idea that big businesses are there only for the money and the small businesses are the only good guys and the big businesses are the bad guys, because the infrastructure, for example, here in the northern countries is very different from the Central Europe, where the population is dense and you have so much more people, so you have so much more small businesses. It's quite different when you look outside the window to for example, where I work now in the architecture and design fields, the big money and businesses have always been there. They're the really important partners. For example, Alvar and Aino Aalto with their two partners, they founded the Artek furniture company in 1946. So the Artek furniture company and, for example, the Iittala class brand, they have been there since the beginning of the design and architecture office. So they're like really important part of the whole history. And not only those, the wood industry have been extremely important because they've been commanding like factories and the factory housing areas, and of course parishes, there's also a lot of churches and so forth. But the big companies in the wood industry and then the design companies, they've been there since the beginning. So in our case, for example, the big businesses are the natural partners. And so I think it's really important to sort of like not to think that they're always the bad guys, especially today because the competition is very, very hard also for their business. So I think the sustainable thinking has been with Artek company or Iittala company or the wood industry. It has been there since the beginning. So let's not fall into these kind of like given ideas and really think about it. Is it like this or is it like that? It depends really on your subject.
Yeah, but I know what to say.
I think that we have to continue the presentation. Sorry.
Let's talk during the lunch.
Let's try to imagine. We want to create a cultural route. I want you to think about what are the steps you would need to take, and I want to lead you through it. So let's look into it. Concrete. You know perhaps already the 5 steps. The first one is you need to find a theme. You need to find a theme, you need to identify heritage elements. Let me say that on the theme, and it has been mentioned here, heritage is always something evolving. And that is why I mentioned the first cultural route. The first concept was very much linked to the traditional concept of cultural tourism, which was basically pilgrimage routes in the beginning. That was where the cultural tourism concept evolved. But cultural tourism and cultural routes are much more than that, and they evolve. So it's really important to capture not only the heritage of the past, but also the heritage of the present. Then identifying heritage elements. Creating a network, and I will go into each of these points a little bit more detail. Then coordinate common activities, and then create, what Miguel said, a common visibility, so that you are recognizable and visible on a transnational level. The problem with the theme is that you need to fulfill certain criteria. The theme should be of European value, and this is always difficult to judge. So it's a criteria which you will need to ask yourself, but there are no objective criteria to be said, yes, this is when it is of European value. But let me say as much, sometimes even a small example of a heritage can be of enormous value for Europe because it's about to be vanished. And it's an example of a minority culture that should stay. So don't just think in big terms. A small example can be very outstanding and representative and important to be kept for Europe. We always have in cultural routes scientific committees, so you need to have a theme that is somehow researched or can be researched on an academic level. I already mentioned it, every cultural route has an obligation to exchange with young people. I have to say that this is, in my experience, a field which culture would comply very well, because it's easy to involve schools, it's easy to involve young people. With kindergartens, you can make a guided tour for kids. It's not a very difficult thing, it's very enriching. We talked about sustainable cultural development. It's about involving local stakeholders, so local producers, really trying to ensure that the local communities profit somehow of the cultural route. You need to develop tourism products and services, and you need to think about how this can be linked to a theme. So I would like to make a group exercise, and I think there are already themes, but what I would like you to really think about is what is a typical theme for the Baltic Sea. If we see this area, what do you think, what are themes which could be further developed as a cultural route? And especially also give a short, let's say, outline, why would it be important for Europe on a European scale? So I would propose that we sit in, let's say, groups of 5, and I would like that culture, for example, certified culture routes are not in one group, but are in different groups, and projects are in different groups, and people from local level, so that you mix a little bit. And let's say we have 15 minutes.
Not that much, because we have to be
10
minutes, yes. We have to keep have an hour for him and work, so
10 minutes. Sit together. 10 minutes. Okay, for us. Quiet, please. We are starting.
At least, yes, I have to say.
Really fast.
Okay, so we have 5 propositions. Thank you, Marianne, for this women theme. We would propose to focus on women in science. That would be really interesting, for example. And the second also was your inspiration yesterday about the forest. But forest industry has been the most important in northern countries. The forest industry has been the most important business in worldwide. So, but it's a very vast theme, though, so we would need to think about that a little bit further. The third theme that we were thinking about that would connect the 20th century and the northern countries specifically, maybe, would be the pop and rock music history. So we have got Mozart ways and that kind of themes in the cultural roots, but we don't have like modern pop and rock music for the moment. The fourth theme that we were thinking about, because we've got the wine route, we should have like a beer route of Europe as well. And then the fifth was maybe this Nordic design and the influence of in different fields, also in fashion, but in design and glassware, and so 5.
So next group.
Yeah, we stick to the oral singing traditions, which is our
surprise.
We were thinking about several things about nature and the lakes and these kind of things, but we come to the conclusion that these elements you can find somewhere else also in Europe, so they are not so special with us, so that we can promote something which is different than in other parts of Europe. But this unbroken chain of oral singing traditions which exist in this area and also in Estonian Baltic countries is something special in Europe. In western parts of Europe, the written technology has been ruled the media for about 1,000 years, so that they have forgotten those old European traditions which have been existing in the whole Europe when we think about 1,000 years ago or even more further in the history. But here we have these traditions, and they can be connected to any other elements of our expedition to the nature and to the lakes and to the forest and these kind of elements. Even to the equality of gender can be seen in this perspective of oral singing traditions. Did I miss something?
Singing revolution, the
Yeah.
connection to the singing revolution.
Yeah, the singing revolution is a very good example of the power of singing, and this can be also seen in European context as something special.
Next.
We had maybe some connection there because so we got stuck on the Olaf theme here and the new parts of the Olaf route, but also when we're talking about there should be more connections between the cultural routes, but also when we're building the new cultural routes, we could also, I think we see synergies also, for example, with these routes, and in some of these rural areas, it's very difficult to build a sustainable tourism around very small or specific routes, so by collaborating, it's possible to do it. And then we also have these connections to Russia, so also in that way integrating, which is sometimes not so easy, but to try to integrate them with the traditions that also go over to the east. It was one part of the discussion anyway.
You were also we had a totally different discussion. Sorry.
And the group behind?
We had different kinds of ideas, and I wish that you then support me when I'm presenting the main points. First, Via Karelia, and maybe the connection with the Sami culture in northern Finland has been all over Finland, the Sami culture. But nowadays it's on the north, and this could be a good theme for Finnish and Russian and Norway and Sweden together. All the elements that we have left in this area. Also the Blue Way, but I think it's a thematic road already existing. It's coming from Russia and crossing the middle of Finland and further on to Sweden. Then sauna culture, Finnish sauna culture could be a very good example because we are already promoting it and we have the brand of sauna cultures in different regions, and it could be a very interesting idea to have it as a public element. Nowadays it's like individual saunas and they are closed from the public, but make it more visible and enjoyable.
And also link it to the neighboring countries, which also have a strong sauna culture.
Yeah. And the Seuraa chain measuring points, it's not Finnish one, but we have I think 5 or 6 or 7 of them as a UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and they are connected with, for example, Eurooppalainen crossing Finland, so maybe there's an idea. And then the rock art paintings, the way that they are doing it in northern areas and in Finland and Sweden, I think they are going to continue about this business. And then our waterways connected with the forest industry and our cultures. You know that we didn't have any good roads on the ground since 19th century, 20th century. So the water roads have been the main way to move from place to another. That's it. Yeah.
Any group that wants to add? Yes.
So our group was concentrating the idea of borderline between Russian and European countries, and we were seeing us as part of Baltic countries in this matter, because we all have had changing borders with Russian in our history, and we see that there are so many ingredients on that theme, because there are quite unique food and arts and handicrafts and well, the singing and all this kind of stuff that we can meld together to a very unique way of seeing the Russian borderline. So this could be something that we might consider when we are heading towards this new cultural way. So, she has something.
Yeah, and we have a bird called kukilintu. It's a symbol of embroidery and apotheosis. So the bird has been flying very long way from Byzanti to from here. And this is very interesting road. What kind of stories we have had with this bird?
It's an interesting thing, definitely, because bird movements is.
We have it already in the new models also, so we are using it in this time. So we have it's only not for master things, but so we can still keep it alive. Maybe give more air for the wings and it flies further. We hope so. And we are already making content from food and cultural subjects. Also that we can deliver when the time is to start this cultural root process. So hoping to work together, that's difficult for
we will.
This is so difficult.
We are so
independent. So we have, I hope so, afterwards have a 3-stroke group from here, starting a new road. Yeah. Not new, but strong.
Yes, thank you. Helena, and I'm speaking first time aloud.
Yeah.
And I was wanted to accompany her and told of the new Northern Lights, which are coming. We have already route from Russian up to the Iceland, because Iceland has also very strong tourism for these kind of routes, and all together for the northern countries. So they have already, we could compare them a lot.
I don't want to be rude, I just need to have the time, and there's still David, so I will continue. I will very fast go through it because you get all the paper from me, where I summarize the most important part. You need to define then heritage elements, and I heard here that you have already done it. It's important that you think about the tangible and the intangible. So not only those monuments, landscapes, but also the intangible singing traditions. So please always keep in mind and think about what are the intangible heritage traditions, storytelling, ways of crafting, which can characterize your theme. The European network of the legal statutes, this is something you need to think about. What I just want to say here is that from my experience with other cultural route, what is successful is sometimes to look into what is existing already, a network that is existing, and trying to incorporate the cultural roots network in it. So Iron Curtain Trail is an example where they use an existing network, and it's sometimes easier. It might not always work, but think about, is there already a network existing of stakeholders which you can use and where you can include the cultural roots governing structure. It's also good in terms of you have already the facilities, you might already have staff which could half-time work on a specific theme of a cultural route. You need to plan common activities. There are 5 different main fields of action. The first one I mentioned, research. You need to have a scientific committee that meets at least once a year. You need to think about the memory and the history of your heritage. I talked already about young people that need to be involved. And cultural and artistic practices, it's about what we know from the Convention on Cultural Diversity. It's all about cultural expressions of artists. And then last but not least, we already talked about it, it's about cultural tourism. You need to think about how you can sustainably manage and plan your tourism. Management plans are not an obligation, but it makes sense if you do a cultural route that you think about some sort of management structures, counting on tourists coming and how you want to manage them. Ensuring that the heritage is protected. And then a common visibility, meaning that you need to think about your brand, because you become a brand, and you need to think about to brand everything that you're doing so that there is a recognizability and that people really can find out when they walk along a route, this is a cultural route, and then they might get interested in other places to visit. I skipped the group exercise. I want to just finalize with one part, and this is why to become a cultural route, and this is what I heard from cultural routes that are certified. So I want to go with you through it, what, in the opinion of others, are advantages. The first one is definitely that cultural routes are an innovative way of involving remote areas that would not profit of a title of a World Heritage Site and might not profit of huge tourism flows, and you incorporate these areas. This is also an obligation. So if you think about culture, think about those remote areas and think about how you can involve them. It's an international recognition. I talked to one cultural route and asked them, and they said, you know, before when we said we need money for this project, people didn't listen to us. Because it's us coming to them saying we are good, we are doing things for intercultural dialogue, for protection of heritage. Since we have the certification of the Council of Europe, we can say the Council of Europe has, an external entity, has recognized our value in these fields of area, and that has increased our support from a political level, but also from a community level. It's a recognition, because it's easy for you to say my route is good, but there you really have someone that is evaluating. And this has increased to what we heard from certified cultural route. This increases the political support because you are incorporated in a program. And as you might know, you are certified in the beginning, but then you are recertified in a regular basis. So you have an evaluation every 3 years. So this regular evaluation ensures that the cultural route is still functioning according to the criteria. You have a democratic governance. That's important because you have a transnational structure and people can join it, can join your network, and they can decide with you on activities. So basically it's an open network normally, and you have very often a presidency which is rotating to ensure a certain democratic level. So this is, let's say, an advantage which might also convince new members to join the network because they see they can participate. Yes, here's shortly the evaluation cycle. So you have regular evaluations, and it's always working like this, that there's an external expert coming, making a field visit to visit your cultural route and to look into what you do and to evaluate. And then he gives a recommendation, and the governing board of the IPA then discusses it. I mentioned it before, it has turned out that having this certification is helping when applying for funding. There are quite a lot of Interreg projects or COSME project, Creative Europe projects which are carried out by cultural routes. And networking, Miguel has mentioned that there is, of course, room to further strengthen this network, but you meet once a year through the training academy, you meet once a year, there is a also a general assembly. So you have a possibility to meet other cultural routes and exchange with them. And on a practical level, what I see is very often that projects, for example, EU projects, very often they are not carried out by just one cultural route, but by several cultural routes. Please never forget the cultural heritage that is behind the cultural route. We need to think about tourism structures, we need to think about tourism products and how to deal with travelers, but please always keep in mind that first and foremost it's about the aim of the cultural route is to protect the heritage, to protect and promote the heritage so that it continues to exist for future generations. And all the other effects it has are secondary effects, which can be very beneficial on an economic level. I don't want to deny it, and which might be necessary. But always think about when you plan your cultural route to do it in a sustainable way, not to threaten your heritage. I had a last cultural group exercise, which I will not do at the moment. If we have time left at the end, I will do it. But I want to close if there is any question left. If not, I would give the floor to David.
Okay, thank you for some. And did you keep the web page?
Yes, the web page is I give you my flyer and I put the web page on the board.
Yes. And so the next person is David Waterworkings, and while he is closing the presentation, he will also present himself in detail, and we will have also inside his presentation some workshop-like discussions, but then we will end sharp 20 past 11 to get to the bus and airport.
You promised me an hour.
Yes.
25.
Yes, but now
okay, listen, just to reassure you, what I want to do in this is I want to be very practical, and I want to focus the presentation essentially on, I want the presentation to lead to the question of the singing heritage. Because that, for me, when I was invited over here, I saw your brochure. I thought it was a very exciting idea here. I could see that you are in early stages of planning, and for me my question was, with the experience I've got looking at other places, how can I help you in these early suggestions? So what we're going to do is we're going to do in the last 20 minutes of my hour, we're going to do a workshop activity, which is going to be focused on the cultural theme of the singing. And what I want to lead you, and I want to lead you there through a series of steps. Right, okay, so first of all, who I am, just 2 minutes, and why I suppose I was invited here, is that I've been working in cultural tourism for 15, 17 years. I'm very much a tourism person, right? Okay. I don't come from the world of culture, I come from the world of tourism. But I've been working on what we call sustainable tourism ever since the years 2002, 2003. I am personally passionate about the idea of tourism that engages local communities. In my mind, I don't call it sustainable tourism. I'm not quite sure what the word is. Sometimes I call it new tourism. It's a different way of thinking about what tourism is. But it is tourism, right? And I've worked with fishing communities. I've worked with sort of farming communities. I've worked with desert communities. I've worked with a lot of different places in a lot of different parts of the world. And what I want to do today, and having done this for about 10 or 15 years, I wrote a couple of books. I did a report for the UNWTO on tourism themes and routes. And secondly, recently, this is my little advertising slot, I've written this book, which is called Tourism Routes and Trails. And I was just saying to my neighbour, I wrote this for very personal reasons. It's in all the time I've been working, I see people are creating these trails, people are creating routes and all the rest of it. People just kind of assume, you say, okay, fine, we've got a tourism area, let's create a route, let's create a trail. And I start asking myself the question, why? Why do people do this? And so I wrote a book, and it took me 2 years to write it, and at the end of it, I don't have the answer.
Why don't you read the book then?
Right, yes, but read the book anyway. But the book has 80 examples and case studies, and essentially my purpose in writing the book was trying to look at all these different examples and saying what's in common here, and why does this work like this, and why does that not work, and why does all of that sort of thing, and have come up with, I hope, some useful tips. First thing that became very clear when I was writing the book is how incredibly powerful a route can be. And we've got sort of two examples here. This is the Lazio region. And the Lazio region, for those who know it, like sort of 10 or 15 years ago, if you were going to go visit, you've got Rome in the middle. And then you've got all this sort of countryside round about. And why would people go to that countryside? You've got sort of, you can spend 3 months in Rome and you still haven't seen everything. And they've got this concept, which is il Cammino del Lazio, which has opened up the region in an extraordinary way. And it's opened up in a way that I use a word which I don't like to use, but I think it's the only word I know, is the word magic. I think there is something about a route which is magic. There's something, you draw a line on a map, and then magically the map is different. Okay, here is the routes in Portugal. You have these rural areas in there, and what is there in that rural area? Well, there's nothing. There's just a few old villages, and there are some farmers, and there are fewer farmers today than there were 5 years ago. But you put a route through it, and suddenly it becomes something. Okay, you may not walk the route. Your family may not walk the route, but it is something. I could walk that route. Okay, and so it's that potential. I think that we had an amazing example yesterday, which is the Iron Curtain Trail. Is that you draw that line and it goes the whole way through Europe, and you put that map up and you say, oh, wow. And suddenly the map looks completely different, right? And you're switching something from what was a barrier into something which is a linkage. And so I think that's a first key thing, I think, for any cultural route, is asking yourself the question, what is the magic? Why is this? Why is it magic? Why does it make people dream? Okay. Next thing, just in terms of power, I'm going to give this small example because I loved this while I was writing the book. It's the Brazilian Carioca Trail. It runs through these protected areas, or rather, they were not protected. These natural areas, not too far from the coast in Brazil, and they were looking for a way to protect that land, and they had this idea: let's build and promote this trail. And it's been tremendously successful. They put the trail right through the heart of it, and suddenly, for the local authorities through which this land went, it's no longer just a piece of forest. It's a sustainable tourism product. It's something which links up communities. It's something which does something. And it has become then very, very easy to develop protection frameworks around that route. So this is an example of a route actually working very specifically for environmental protection. And we don't have time, unfortunately, to go into it, but I think that Marianne yesterday put up this slide, which I thought was enormously interesting, which was about the way I interpret it. It's about landscape. It's that all routes are about landscape, by definition. And routes are ways of describing the landscape, or defining the landscape, making the landscape something which has some sort of meaning. And landscape, therefore, in any case in Europe, is culture. As I say, any European landscape is a cultural space, even if there are no houses on it, even if there are no people. So, taking a step back, first of all, tourism. I told you I was a tourism person. Okay, so you've got a concept of tourism which I would call classic tourism, meaning a tourism that has existed, which has been built up, which has got an enormous framework of know-how, which is in the regions, at the national level, often at the local level, people who have been trained and who've tested and all the rest of it. And the concept of these are the kinds of concepts that go around this type of classical tourism. If you're going to create a route, a tourism route, the purpose is to link up different tourist assets. The purpose is to promote a theme. The purpose is to encourage collaboration between the different stakeholders along there. The purpose is to give visibility to remote areas. The purpose is to disperse tourism out of the big towns and into the others. And these kinds of products, they do it in a way which is very easily accessible to the public. You can see Southern Ocean Drive in Australia. You look at that map and you immediately understand, oh, I can get in my car and I can drive along this thing and I can stop and I can see that I can drink local wine and I can eat local fish, and there's probably fantastic views and things like that. So it's all there. The Arctic Way in Iceland, same sort of thing. This is an area of Iceland. Most of the tourism takes place on the southern shores of Iceland. This is a way of opening up the northern stuff, and that tourism logic can be criticised because sometimes it says it's green and it's not as green as it claims. But it's a very powerful tool, and the basic logic, one would be foolish to just throw the whole thing out of the window. Second idea that I want to put in here is the concept of challenge. That you have certain routes, very different from the Arctic Way, very different from the Australian example. Here are routes where a core of the concept is that there's a challenge. Could I do that? Am I healthy enough, young enough, energetic enough, determined enough, stubborn enough to be able to do this thing? And the challenge is met perhaps by a small handful of people. For example, how many people have done the whole thing from one end to the other? Probably not very many, but it could be done. I'm sure it's been done, yes. And potentially I could get on my bike, and potentially I could do it if I was stupid enough. The point is that if I can imagine it, the challenge is already part of me. So, and everybody, even if out of this room, there is only one or two who thinks, well, I think I might do that one day. Every single person in this room has in some way engaged in this thing because other humans have done it. Okay, Via Transalpina, another example, fantastic walking route which has linked up a lot of other trails to be able to go from one end of the Alps to the other. And very much, and both of them very much cultural routes. And they're cultural routes which are to do with landscape, and they're cultural routes which are to do with engagement with landscape. Okay? It's a different thing than getting out of your car, looking out over a valley and saying, that's a beautiful view. You are actually personally engaged. So, we're on to the theme of looking at cultural routes. Very quickly, here are some ways of looking at it. Now, when you categorize it, we saw the categories for the cultural routes of the Council of Europe. The way I categorized it is in terms of motivation, in terms of what are people trying to do, what are people wanting, what are the aspirations of the people. And the first aspiration is memory. And a lot of cultural routes you see, whether on a local level, whether on an international level, it's to do with remembering things. And for example, the Charles V route, an important aspect of it is simply memory. Linked to memory, but slightly different, is identity. Here is a cultural route, the Trail of Tears. There are different Trail of Tears in the US. This is one of the biggest, and it remembers the Indian tribes, the Native American tribes who were moved out of their territories and made to settle in other parts of the United States. And they had, in certain cases with very dramatic circumstances, they had to walk thousands of miles, and women and children died along the way. It's something that is engraved very deeply in consciousness. And the Trail of Tears initiatives started again back in the 1980s, 1990s. They were small phenomena. Now, when they have on specific memorial days, you will get tens of thousands of people who have some link to this heritage, or people just who have a sympathy with that heritage, who will walk. And that, of course, is very high engagement. It's engagement on the level of saying, not only am I doing something which is powerful, but I'm doing something which is me. Identity, here's a local example in Brittany, the Trowbridge, and there is an annual walk, but in the other times of the year people walk it on their own. Again, it is very much to do with who I am, of being Breton. So, we've introduced here a concept of engagement, and we'll see in a moment how this applies on the singing route. This study here was done by the ETC, and it was a study on tourism passion communities. I was not involved in the study. And it identified what were primary interests for travellers when they were travelling. And you see, without much surprise, a sort of a big thing which is called nature, which raises another question: what do people mean by nature? It probably covers a lot of different things. Gastronomy, city life, exploration and cultural identity, sport, adventure, and so on. Now, this is something which I'd say is now pretty much a standard idea in modern tourism, which is that people don't travel to see things, they travel to do things and to be things. So They travel according to some who they are, what they believe, what their life is, how they perceive their life, and so on. And that's the importance of these kinds of categories. And you have countries like Ireland and Australia that have done a tremendous amount of work in terms of that kind of motivation-led tourism, which is very extremely interesting. And I think that sort of motivation-led, those kinds of studies broke once and for all this kind of myth of there are only two kinds of tourism, one which is your mass beach tourism and the other which is your put on your sandals and be a sustainable tourism, and a realization that it's a much richer environment. And this I think is a useful diagram, and it's a useful diagram when you're looking at any kind of tourism. Is the stretch from awareness to engagement. Awareness is very simply, I know that thing exists. So I know that in Northern Karelia they have this sort of singing tradition, and I know that there is some kind of tourism which will enable me to go and learn about it. Attraction is where that thing has been packaged or presented in such a way the person says, oh, I'd like to do that. Okay, so for example, there is a festival once a year, and you can go to this festival and you can spend 2 days there and you can learn about the tradition and see other singing traditions or whatever. I'd like to do that. Okay, there's something you can actually choose to do. Involvement is the person goes to the festival, they see the acts, there's maybe some museum, they go in there and they see things, but there is still there's an involvement in the theme, but it's still not exactly, it's not them, right? Engagement is where they learn that when my daughter gets married, I could get a singer who could come and sing at my daughter's wedding. Okay, so this thing is no longer something somebody else does. This is something that I do, or I have some sort of personal relation with the people who are running this, who are operating this tradition. Okay, and these are, as you can see, these are difficult things. These are not easy solutions. Oh, let's do this, or oh, let's have a festival. This is taking the thing a level further. And the engagement, I think that's one of the great attractions of the St. Olaf's waterways, is that when you have that proposal at the beginning, you can already imagine the engagement. You can already imagine that I get onto a boat and I sail across, and it's me doing that. It's not somebody else. I'm not watching somebody else doing that thing. Okay? And so, I don't know how realistic this is, but if you could get the people singing, the people who come, I don't know. Let's see. If you take the example of those of us who were last night at this extraordinary place where we had dinner, we were definitely involved. I felt engaged because I felt I'd established some sort of that woman who was running it. She established a relationship with us, which was a personal relationship. And she was sort of saying to me, like, I was talking about the food, and she said, "Oh, well, you prefer this." She was telling me what food I prefer. Okay. So I was thinking it sounded like my mother. So that. So, and how does this thing work? This is a very useful way of thinking about the engagement. Is any cultural theme, at the root of it, at the top of your triangle, you've got what I call experts. The expert is the person who has no choice in the matter. Let's say you're doing, it's bird watching. Let's say it's a region where you can go and you can see birds flying, nesting, whatever it is. The experts are the people who are employed by the national park. They're the people who, that's their job. Their job is dealing with birds, okay? The next level down is your enthusiasts. Enthusiasts are your bird watchers. They're the people who will travel 2,000 miles because there is a rare bird in that area, and I want to see that bird. And not only do I want to see that bird, I want to be talking to those experts. So when I arrive there, I want to meet the people from that national park. I want to find out where that bird is nesting. I want to see if somebody can guide me to the place. I want to, so the engagement at the enthusiast level is extremely high. You've then got the level of the supporters, which is people who think going on a holiday to this, that sounds like a really nice idea. I could go to Extremadura, for example, which is, to take that example, if I say to you, how many of you in this room want to go to Extremadura? Don't know, maybe, yes. You want to go home, yes. Yeah, but I know people who have gone to Extremadura because of the birds, to do bird watching, okay? And if those birds hadn't been in Extremadura but had been in Galicia, they would have gone to Galicia, right? And so these are the supporters are the people who think this is a nice idea, who are willing to sign on, who will, as it were, buy the tourism product, which is your bird watching, or follow your circuits and all the rest of it. And then you've got the general public, which may find themselves in Extremadura for some completely different reason, and they see, okay, there are birds seem to be a big deal. I go in the visitor centre, there's lots of photographs of them. I talk to somebody, the person says, well, if you're here, then you should really go and see this bird sanctuary or whatever it is. Okay? And the way the whole thing works is it's this drive that goes down from the top to the bottom. If you don't have the experts, you've got nothing from a tourism point of view. Okay? If you don't have the enthusiasts, you've got nothing. And if you've got the experts, if you've got the enthusiasts, then the supporters will follow. And in particularly, they will follow in the 21st century because they will be on their Facebook sites. And if they are bird watchers, believe me that 9 out of 10 of the people that they're communicating with on their Facebook sites are also bird watchers, and the thing spreads. I don't want to say like the coronavirus, but it spreads. Okay, so and which brings you back to this basic idea, which is that people more and more are working in these kind of communities. You don't necessarily belong to one community, maybe to several, but those communities are now extremely powerful. And my view when people talk to me and they say, well, what sort of marketing should you do? My answer is almost always communities. Who are the communities? That's where the power is. That's where the drive is. Because you can put all of the advertising that you want. If you don't have the enthusiasts, if you don't have the experts, if you're not engaging with the supporters, that's wasted money. Okay, and then that leads through to your general public. And what is it you're trying to do all the time from a marketing point of view, from a tourism marketing point of view? What you're trying to do all the time is drive people up this triangle. You're trying to turn the general public into supporters. You're trying to turn the supporters into enthusiasts. The enthusiasts already want to become experts, so you don't have to do anything there. Okay, so that's and all of this works because it's focused, because it's clear to people what it is that you're offering. I'm going to jump that, I think. I want to give you now one main case study. It'll take 5 minutes. No, I'm going to show you 2 case studies, and they'll take about 7 minutes. The first one, and you'll see immediately the relation and the significance with regard to this particular cultural route. This is the Blue Ridge. These are the Blue Ridge music trails. This is in North Carolina. The Blue Ridge Mountains, part of the Appalachian chain, up until the end of the last century, this was like nowhere. They were these very small farming communities, mining communities, very difficult to get to, very poor roads. People didn't visit them. And like lots of other places in the world, they started to empty, the young people started to leave. Question, what is it we can do? What about some tourism? What kind of tourism? What is it that we have? You go through all the same logic, and they say, well, what's special here? Music. That they have these forms of music which in fact have been extremely influential in America. You've all heard about bluegrass and things like that. The bluegrass styles originated in these mountains. Afterwards, they left to more urban areas, and it was called bluegrass, and it became a whole genre and all the rest of it. But a lot of the music, very interestingly, is strongly influenced by Cherokee music. And when you do the analysis of the rhythms and the styles of the music, it's Native American songs. They tracked down old people, usually old women, who still knew the old Cherokee songs, and they recorded them, and it was amazing that you compared them to the local music styles, and you could see exactly how they fit together. Anyway, the point is, that's what they've got. They've got the music, and this is backed by the state, North Carolina. There are a couple of big cultural institutes in the state which are just supporting this initiative. And here's how it works. They identified that the thing that was central to the whole concept and project were the venues. Traditionally, the music was played, it could have been played in bars or restaurants, but a lot of it was actually in barber shops. That's to say, places where people would go to get their hair cut. And people still remember, apparently, when they were young, they'd go with their father to these barbershops, and there would be a musician, or a little group singing, or whatever it is. So, and the venues where the musicians play are under threat. That's to say, they tend to be small venues. Maybe there's some sort of pub type atmosphere, and they can't afford to get the musicians. They want to bring in enough people, I don't know, for whatever reasons. Anyway, so the focus was on these venues, and they tried to find out what is it you need as a venue to be able to do this. And the answers were things like, well, we need to get the right music. We can't contact the musicians that we want to. There's no network to be able to do this. Okay, so let's set up a network to try and get these, to identify who these musicians are. They built up the venues one by one, so it's really very much a town by town initiative. In this town, this is where people go to listen to music. How do we help that? How do we help that venue? Once you've started to get its network of venues, you've got the attention of the musicians. Musicians start to say, hey, yes, this is a place that it's worth going to play. I could go and spend a week there, and I could play here and play here. And so you've got the music. Once you've got the musicians, you've got the music lovers coming in. Once you've got the music lovers coming in significant numbers, then you've got the tourism operators paying attention and saying, hey, this is interesting. I could sell a week in the Blue Ridge Mountains listening to authentic music. And you've got, therefore, the people saying, I could open a bed and breakfast because this music tradition, 8 or 9 months of the year, it's viable. You've got events. Once you've got a certain dynamic moving, then you can create events, and then that doubles the effect. And all of this is supported at the community level, local authority level, and state authority level. And once you get to a certain level, which they have got to, you get the music industry starting to be getting interesting, and they say, well, we can do compilations of this kind of music, and we can do a statewide festival of it, and so on. And I won't go into that, but that's also the young people and the teaching part of it, which is very important. Okay, so what I want to focus on here is that you have an idea, and they have questions like, for example, questions that was asked, is there some interest in having an actual trail, or having a map that takes you from one place to the other? In their particular case, they said, no, we don't see the interest. People can look at ordinary maps. What they want to know is that there's an area here, and that in that area there are different places. That was their decision. I don't know if it's the right one or the wrong one, but that's the decision they made, and it seems to work. Okay, so possibly a thing to say on what we were talking about previously is that the decision, and I think James kind of said it, which is that the decision whether you do the thing comes out of the theme, the thing you're trying to do. I'm trying to do something, therefore a route will be helpful. Or I'm trying to do this other thing, therefore why create a route? So I think that's a question, I think, for yours, is that what is important? If the thing that's really important is the singing tradition, does this actual walking or driving route, does it support that? You might say yes, it does, or you might say no, that's a distraction. That's not the central thing. That's your decision, of course. Take a second example quickly, which is the Kumano-Kodo pilgrimage trails. It's on the Kii Peninsula in Japan, and as the Japanese so often do, they've done this exceptionally well. And they've produced this network of trails linking up ancient temples and monasteries. And the way they're developing it is they've identified one of the trails, which is this one here, whose name I'm afraid I forget. And that particular trail is a 4-5-day walk. And so 4-5-day walk means it's not particularly athletic. So if you are in reasonable walking condition, anyone could say, well, I could do 5 days. And they've set up this network very, very effectively, this network of places that you can stay. They have norms and guidelines for the different places. If you want to go on the map, then you need to follow certain guidelines which tend to favour places which show traditional forms, Japanese traditional forms of accommodation, and all the different services. And at any point in the route, you can step out and you can find yourself in a place where there's accommodation, or you can find people, you can stop there for overnight, and so on. One of the reasons I chose this one is I haven't done this. I'd love to. I'd love to go to Japan and do this. And it's enormously successful. The model, therefore, is that they've done that with that first trail, and then little by little they're going to add the other trails, so therefore you will then have a whole network of walking trails of that kind. And the way it works is, at the heart of it, you've got this pilgrimage experience. If you stay on the trail, never get off the trail, you don't see a house. You stop at temples and things like that, but you're walking essentially through the forests. Most people will stop for the night and go into a hotel or something like that, but you could. So there is a real pilgrimage experience, a real meaning to it. There is themed services and accommodation which supports this pilgrimage experience, and behind it you've got this very, very rich heritage, hundreds, if not thousands of years of history. And that's supported by, therefore, that is extremely attractive for people who perceive themselves as pilgrims, but also for people these are the enthusiasts, these are the supporters, the tourists who say, well, I couldn't do Camino de Santiago, but 5 days I could do that. And then afterwards I could go to other Japanese cities. So, and then it is supported at this level by your academics and your teachers. And you can begin to see here the elements of the cultural roots of the Council of Europe, which are sort of in gestation. So here your academics and teachers, that's your proto-scientific committee, which is starting to build. So if they wanted, they can't because they're in Japan, but if they wanted to become a cultural root of the Council of Europe, linking up with other places, then they've got the different pieces in place. And they correspond to what you were talking about before, those first two elements on the requirements. So, I just put this up here because I'm sorry to keep coming back to this, but I think the thing that is so brilliant about this is it is so simple. And when I say simple, simple is not easy. Simple takes a lot of work to get to simple. And this is so simple, meaning that the idea, you get that idea, you show that map, you've got it. Okay, and that's really, I think, the biggest advice I'd give to anyone who wants to develop a cultural route is, how do we get to simple? How do we get to something which is a person can understand in 10 seconds? And what's the roadmap towards that? What's the way of getting to that thing? Because once you've got that thing, then everything else, it's it's right, isn't it, Miguel? It's you've got to get that sort of that central concept that people can grab and get hold of. Yeah. Okay. So good. we still have our 20 minutes. The exercise I want to do is, I want you to go into groups like you did before. You can take the same groups if you want to. I kind of like to mix up you guys. Could sort of two of you go to other groups? And what I'd like you to do is, on a sheet of paper, we've got sort of some blank sheets of paper here, is draw a diagram like this. Okay? Okay, listen carefully. What I want you to do is I want you to imagine this cultural route, the way, and I'll tell you certain basic things which I kind of assume. One is I'm assuming that the singing tradition is very central to the idea. I'm assuming that the singing traditions in other countries like Estonia, Lithuania are also going to be important ideas and important partners. And I think that's all I'm assuming. You might in your group say, well, actually, this concept of the actual, walking route or a driving route is essential. That's for your group to determine. But I want you to produce something like this. And when I've done this exercise, I start doing it and then I cross it all out and then I do it again. So do it in pencil, or else be prepared to scrap it and start again. Start with this central idea and say, what is the core of it? What is the thing that's going to make the thing work? Okay. What we're talking about here is we're not talking about what is going to make the culture work. We're talking about attracting people. We're talking about tourism. We're talking tourism in the sense of other people coming to see it, to experience it, to understand it. Okay? So you've got 12, 15 minutes.
If we want to summarize, it's 10 minutes.
You gave me an hour, so I've got till 25 past. Okay, and when the exercise is finished, that's finished. That's it.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah.
Then we collect them, all these papers. We collect them to, continue.
Yeah, I'm going to stop you like 2 minutes before the exercise is finished. And just pause and very quick.